this is such an impressive abomination that it actually warrants the word scam in the most legitimate sense. That's 1 stick of RAM. So we're also going to check for if there's 16 gigabytes of RAM apparently. This one is 8 gigabytes. I can reintroduce you to NVIDIA's Fermi series of GPUs. Today we're reviewing the most impressively bad pre-built gaming PC we've probably looked at yet. This one takes it to a whole new level. It redefines the word scam or ripoff in many new ways that are creative and a little bit terrifying, frankly. And so we're going to be looking at the iBUYPOWER Element Mini. This one is the 167A model. It has a GT 730 asterisk. Not really. We'll talk about that. That was shocking. And an R5 3600, which really needed to be rescued, and maybe we can do some good with this system by pulling it out of here. Before that, this video is brought to you by Crucial and its Crucial X6 portable SSD. We use these external SSDs all over the office for rapidly transferring games and files between systems. The X6 comes in 500 gigabytes, 1 terabyte, 2 terabyte, and 4 terabyte capacities with USB-A or USB Type-C for the cable. For a high-speed and high-capacity external drive from Crucial, click the link in the description below. So this is part of our pre-built review series. All the same rules apply as all the other ones, which means we're trying to buy something that is pre-assembled without too much input from us. In this case, there was no input from us. We bought something that was already built by iBUYPOWER. All we had to do was pay them money, and then it magically showed up here. This one was $690. The spec sheet says that it, well, we'll go over it in more detail in the teardown, but it gets quite a few things wrong before. This is why we ordered it. We were amused at the idea of a 4-core R5 3600, didn't know those existed, so we ordered one. Also, the GT 730 is quite unique, and everything else is pretty bad too. Now, to be clear about one thing, some of these things aren't entirely iBUYPOWER's fault. iBUYPOWER did build the system, and it did put these components together, which is probably the worst defense out of all of this. But some of the listing mistakes, like the incorrect core count and the 1 gigabyte hard drive, are mistakes that probably were made by the third-party marketplace seller. The price also mostly comes from the seller, but the worst part of the build still comes from iBUYPOWER, and that's the GPU. So we're gonna be looking at this. Now, iBUYPOWER, the last time we bought one, we bought it directly from iBUYPOWER, and our biggest complaint was that they shipped it without any packing foam, and the video card ripped out of the motherboard PCIe slot, and more or less, for most consumers, would have destroyed the computer. They would have had to send it back. We obviously were able to fix it, but most people would have, the journey would have ended there for that PC. iBUYPOWER, from what we understand, has instituted a whole list of QC checks since that video. They were talking with us about it. It does sound genuinely promising, the improvements iBUYPOWER is trying to make to its QC process to make sure that they're shipping systems that won't fall apart from lacking just foam. Any kind of packaging really at all would have been good for the previous system. You can blame a little bit on shipping, but if you don't pack it properly, at that point it's not really shipping's fault. It's the shipper's fault. So anyway, they're trying to address that. This is what we're looking at. There's a lot to talk about today. It's really bad. It's impressive. So let's get started. So we're doing something different here. We actually pulled this part of the teardown forward because this is such an impressive abomination that it actually warrants the word scam in the most legitimate sense. We will be taking apart the rest of the computer. However, this was it's such an important part of this story that it really did need to come forward. And not only because of small details like the fact that half of the PCIe pins down there are missing, so it's actually running by 8 instead of by 16, but for much larger, more important, and profound details, because this is in fact a very special GT 730. This is a GT 730 in name only, and that's because well, let's just open it up and I'll show you. This is going to be a very fast teardown. I think there's only 4 screws on here. So here we go. Fortunately, the warranty void if removed sticker probably doesn't matter too much, seeing as the GPU I'm about to show you is 11 years old. Maybe it's only 10. It might only be 10. I don't want to misrepresent it. But it's pretty old, so probably the warranty is not too important at this point. Of course, to be clear, it was sold as a new card as part of a brand new computer. That's about $700 for the whole computer. Here's what you get. Is everybody ready? Is everybody who's been in this game for a little while ready to reminisce? Winter's coming up, at least in this hemisphere. So if you've needed something to heat your room, perhaps I can reintroduce you to NVIDIA's Fermi series of GPUs. That's how long this has been around. This is a very special GPU. Let's get the alcohol out. I mean, that kind too, but. All right, that's what matters down there, that number. It's a GF108. If that doesn't sound familiar, I'll give you a hint. It's 40 nanometers, the process technology that is, and it's Fermi. And if that name doesn't sound familiar, that's because it is it's the crypt keeper of GPUs at this point. It's a 700 megahertz GT630. That's what this is. And when I say it's a GT630, what I actually mean is it's a GT440, because the GT730 in this variation is a rebranded GT630, which is already a rebranded GT440, which is from February 2011. Or it actually might be a GT430. We'll look it up and put it on the screen. So that's actually insane. The problem here is this. It's pretty simple. It's the same as with the GT1030, where there's multiple variations of the 730, some significantly better than others, some significantly newer than others. There are Kepler 730s, and these are code names that if you don't recognize them, that's okay. They've been around for a while. But there are Kepler 730s with GDDR5. This is Fermi from 2011 with DDR3 memory. We have shown in the past with a GT1030, even with a GPU as low-end as that, as impressively low-end as a 1030, we've shown how a reduction from G5 to DDR4 will massively impact the performance, sometimes approaching something like 50%. So this is actually far worse than any modern APU, and it's worse than even Intel's integrated graphics. And not even just the recent stuff, like older stuff from a generation or two ago. That's how bad this is. And unfortunately, because it has the same name, and because in Amazon listings it is frequently only called GT730 without any specificity as to which specific variant of GT730 it is, you end up where consumers, if they decide to research it a little bit, will look up maybe benchmarks and find entirely different results than reality if they pull up benchmarks for a 730 which is much more modern than this 730. So as always, having multiple products with the same name is a bad idea unless you want to sell a lot of them and have no morals, in which case, excellent idea. Keep doing it, NVIDIA. Great job as always. And of course, Amazon sellers or iBUYPOWER, whoever it was in the chain for this particular system, who decided to stuff this 730 into a box and just call it 730. Now, if you're wondering how bad it gets for your $690 pre-built gaming PC, if you're thinking, well, I just need a display out and I'm willing to get ripped off, I hate money and I would like to spend it on something that's a decade old and was worthless even then. If you're that person, it still has problems because even the display outs are totally f***ed on this card. So for the display, we'll just get a close-up of those. You have your standard HDMI, there's DVI on there, but even the HDMI is problematic. This lacks DisplayPort, obviously, but the single HDMI port only supports up to 1080p 60, while the DVI connector is able to support 2560 by 1600 at 60 hertz, dual link. And no, using DVI to HDMI doesn't circumvent the 1080p HDMI limit that you'll have right there. So you could run a custom resolution or dig up a 1440p monitor with a DVI port. We, however, decided to just say that this is bullshit and poor treatment of customers spending $700 on a pre-built, and something that probably most customers of that pre-built are unprepared to deal with anyway. So then, for basically almost all intents and purposes, this system is incapable of outputting anything higher than 1080p at this point. And for all intents and purposes, in totality, the system is more or less a scam. It's been misrepresented in many ways. Some of them we haven't shown yet. We're getting to that in the next part of the teardown, the part that we did technically before this, but we've had to pull this forward because it was so offensively bad. So at this point, you could basically stop watching the review. We've told you the conclusion. It's not something we're gonna recommend. But if you would like to continue watching the train as it piles up off of the tracks, you can continue doing that in the teardown. Let's get to that. Time to tear it down. So we're gonna look for our 1 gigabyte hard drive we were promised. We're also gonna look for the GT730, the R5 3600, and make sure That's 1 stick of RAM. So we're also going to check for if there's 16 gigabytes of RAM, apparently. That's been added to the punch list now. Patrick's already done all the testing on this, as usual. So it's all done. It's done through thermals, through gaming, everything. We just need to look at the build quality and the assembly. One of the things, so I try to isolate myself from the process, the review process, up until this point, so that I don't form too many opinions until I'm on camera so we can experience it together. It's like a form of therapy for me, because if I had to go through this alone, then it would be bad. And the first thing I noticed when I started looking at this was the impressive quality of the power button, where the impressive quality of the power button, where it's got this nice decisive click where it sounds like it's going to get stuck soon. Like, probably this will survive 100 button cycles, and then it's going to be stuck permanently, and then you'll have to leave the side panel on and turn your computer on with a fork. So this is the inside of it. It's an iBUYPOWER system, as you would expect, by which I mean there's no internal packing foam. This ships without the foam. They said they were going to start adding it. This card might be too low end for them, maybe, to add the packing foam, but if you remember our last iBUYPOWER instance, it needed packing foam, and it was also a pretty small video card. But this one did survive. It didn't get ripped out of the socket and destroy the PCIe slot this time. Oh, nice. I was just going to immediately discard this, but I discovered an issue. So I was looking at this, and I was thinking, you know, these panels are normally involve adhesive, and a cheap computer is not going to do that well. And that was accurate. You can see it's starting to peel already. Check that out. That's pretty good, huh? We just got this like a week ago, and the glass is already peeling off of the metal tabs that hold it onto the side of the computer. So that's what that is right there. It's just a double-sided adhesive that's not particularly functional. So just a reminder what we're going to be looking for as we open this thing up. We're looking for a 1 gigabyte hard disk. Just to make sure you heard me correctly, that's G, not T. 1 gigabyte. We are also going to be looking for a GT730 2 gigabyte model. We're going to be looking for an R5 3600, actually a good CPU. We're looking for 16 gigabytes of memory. And what else? We are also going to be seeking out a screen display size that is 1 centimeters, I assume diagonally long. We'll be looking for a 4-core processor, even though it's an R5 3600, which is 6 cores, but okay. And now it's time to start taking it apart. I'm actually going to start by taking the back panel up. Normally we do this last, but I do it early this time. The thumb screws are just normal screws with plastic grips around them. That's not the worst in the world, but they are the cheapest possible thumb screws you could make. It's not particularly clean, but it's not the messiest we've ever worked with. What the f is this? What the hell is that? It has a growth. It's like, hopefully it's benign. I don't know what that is. Is the panel that wobbly? Not too bad. So we've got God, man. I haven't even gotten to the components yet. We've got a foam strip that is peeling off. Oh, I see what this is supposed to do. I'll try and get a shot of this before I mess with it. So these foam tape strips are supposed to be holding RGB LED connectors into the header on the PCB here, but this header is actually falling out. This is something Patrick warned me about. He said, hey, one of the fans, the LEDs don't come on. Look into that when you take it apart. Well, I found it. That one was pretty easy. So that was hidden under here. And good eye by Patrick for even noticing that one of the LEDs was off, considering they're so ever present at this point that I've become blind to them. But that's not connected. Was that clear? Is that obvious enough? That's obviously not connected. There's an ADATA SU650 SATA SSD in here, which I think is a 240 gigabyte SSD. There is no, if you look closely, you might miss it because it's hard to conceptualize nothingness, but there's no 1 gigabyte hard drive. So we've been scammed. We're missing our gigabyte of storage we were promised. It had some value to a collector somewhere. The cabling's a nightmare back here. This, you know, it's a non-modular power supply. This is to be expected to some extent. But this is just like, it looks like they ate all of the cables and then threw them back up into the case. Whereas what I'd like to see is perhaps not pre-chewed cables, like something maybe still bundled together in some sort of reasonable fashion. Let's get to the interesting stuff. So as soon as I turned this thing on its side, I spotted several issues with cabling that are somewhat concerning. This is the most obvious one. Check out how taut that cable is there from the CPU cooler. Can you see that okay? Let's get this RAM stick out of the way. Oh, wow. That's, oh my God. We'll come back to that. That was awful. I'll come back to that. So see how this is pulled really tight. This should be rotated the other way, or a longer cable or something. So this is pulling on the header, and the header on the board is actually not bent, but that amount of strain on the cables, it's just not good. It's somewhere along the line they're gonna have RMAs from these getting ripped, the pins getting ripped. It is a longer cable. Why are we doing this to it? Why are you doing this to yourself? Come on. I don't know if that's, I think that's iBUYPOWER's fault. I'm pretty sure they're the ones who built this computer. I'm baffled by it, but next one up, check out that USB 3 header from my angle. And we'll give you that angle. It looks pretty bad. Is it clear how bent that is? So these cables are notoriously fragile because it's about 20 pins. I think it's exactly 20 in there. We've seen them held in with glue in the past with the Walmart system. Oh, that sounds healthy. So that was at a nice steep angle, pulling the pins as much as it could. It's another issue where it looks like it's not physically damaged, but you do that enough times and someone's computer is going to be messed up. I don't like this cooler at all. I'm a little bit concerned about this. So this is, actually you can see what Patrick's done here. These stickers, whenever you see one of these stickers in our videos, that's a tachometer sticker. So it's for a physical tach where it can, we use a laser tach normally to get the fan speed. The only reason we need that is if either we don't trust a cable, so this technically is a 4-pin PWM fan cable. If we don't trust it, we don't trust the motherboard reading, or if the manufacturer of the fan has made it in such a way that we can't get the fan speed through software or through BIOS, then we put one of these on and use a physical tach. So this tells me that this is more of a matter of me understanding my team than me understanding iBUYPOWER, because no one can do that. But I understand that Patrick, when I see this, at some point did not trust this cooler. So that gives me something, it gives me a clue to look for, even though I've told him to keep me in the dark on the quality of the system. I'm a little bit surprised they put 3 fans in this box for the price it is, but RGP sells, genuinely, like it does actually sell, so that's why. We're gonna use one of our tools from the GN toolkit. These are back on back order on the store. It's a 10-piece toolkit. Very high quality tools, useful especially for video card disassembly. If you're interested in that, for water blocking them, servicing them, adding new thermal paste, whatever, you can grab it on store.gamersnexus.net. They're on back order. They've been in high demand. People wanted them for months now, and they're finally back. It's a great way to support us at the same time as getting something quality in return. Oh, let's come back to that RAM. When I picked this thing up, it was gross. Look at this. So first of all, this heat spreader, most of them are for marketing. Let's be honest. You don't really need the heat spreaders on most memory, but this one is so, it's like the most egregious version of just for marketing I've seen, because it's really thin material, and when you pick it up by the top, it's like it squishes together. And that's why when I pulled it out of the board, I was like, ew, oh, gross, because that's not a great feeling. The brand is Neo Forza. One of the best known brands in memory. Let's take a look at their marketing page. Capacity's power speed is king. We are a professional team studying in computer memory and storage devices for more than 10 years. Neo Forza, the new force for gaming market. Okay, capital G there. Neo represents from virtual to reality. What? Okay, so to be very clear, this memory, there's no spec listed on the website, and that means you might not even get this memory. You're probably going to get kind of whatever's available at the time. They normally do like a dump bin for at least one component on these low-end things, and it's going to be memory this time. This one is 8 gigabytes, 3000, it claims a CL15. We'll look at that more later. Andrew asked, why is the warranty void if you remove the sticker? And the only thing I can come up with is the quality of this must be so poor that if you try to remove the sticker, it will also peel the heatsink off of the RAM. That's the best I got. Let's take the board out. Okay, there was no glue involved. That's great. Good. So the motherboard, I mean, it's not high quality, but this is an ASRock thing at this point. It's also, well, I don't know. You wouldn't want to, this is not something you'd want to upgrade in socket with to anything higher end. It's an A320M. You can see the VRM. We've got missing caps here, so we've got 4 spots for caps there, 1 spot for a cap there. A couple other missing components where there's solder points on the board, but no component. That just means it's a stripped down model. But if it's a low end system, they're going to strip it down somewhere. Just they decided it to be the motherboard and the RAM and also the hard drive and the video card. But the CPU is right. So okay, so that's going to wrap up the teardown. We're going to get into the benchmarking now. We have thermals, noise, gaming, as always, to look at. Gaming is going to be pretty rough with this. I was informed that this computer couldn't launch any of the games that we normally test with, so we had to modify it a bit. But let's get started. Time to get into some testing. We won't spend a lot of time here, even though we ran a lot of tests, because you shouldn't buy this thing. Unlike the Redux pre-built we just reviewed, iBUYPOWER definitely didn't overdo its cooling solution. The tiny deep cool heatsink kept the R5 3600 between 92 and 93 degrees Celsius throughout the entire test. T-die shot up immediately and then stayed there, taking fewer than just 4 minutes to go from idle to 90 degrees. Temperatures this high will affect performance, especially on AMD CPUs, and are also bordering on TJ Maxx trips or hard throttles if the ambience is too high or sufficient dust accumulates. Of course, that's not all because of the cheap cooler. The case is also to contribute. Removing the front panel dropped that steady state temperature to 89 degrees. GPU temperatures weren't as bad, with an initial steady state of 72 to 73 and dropped to 65. That's still kind of hot since the GPU is a decade old, but we'll take it. Moving on, before we get into the game results, we're pushing forward with BIOS and software for some important background. Out of the box, the 167A shipped with NVIDIA driver version 390.65, which is the oldest that we've seen on a pre-built. This driver dates all the way back to January of 2018, and it's not because this system was built in 2018. No, in fact, it was built this year, but it still has old drivers, and they're from the era of the 10 series GPUs. That's for all the reasons we already talked about, where this isn't the real GT730. The real GT730, if it would please stand up, is still supported. The GPU here is pathetic. It sucked when it was new, 10 years ago, and it sucks an order of magnitude more now. iBUYPOWER's product description for the 167A says, quote, booting up alongside the R5 3600 is an NVIDIA GeForce GT730. This GPU is no slouch, but instead is one great for light gaming. No, it's not. It's not even good compared to the real GDDR5 GT730s. It borders on unusable, not just because of the performance, which we'll show you, but software compatibility issues as well. All of the games we tried to test warned us that the drivers were 3 years out of date, and the last driver that shipped for this card was 391.35, because it's a GT440. This will never receive another driver update. The only defensible use of a card like this is as a cheap display connection to something like a NAS or a home server. But MSI's packaging and the cooler design are obviously targeted towards budget gamers. iBUYPOWER is saying it's for gaming, and NVIDIA branded it like it's for gaming. So this was destined for a landfill the moment it was conceived, which is presumably where iBUYPOWER dug it up from. NVIDIA, MSI, and iBUYPOWER all should be ashamed here. While we're on the subject, we might as well finish out the BIOS segment. XMP was not applied to the single stick of 3000 MHz memory, limiting it to 2400. But there also isn't any particular RAM speed advertised on the system's product page. No CPU overclocking is allowed. The R5 3600 is an unlocked CPU, but the ASRock A320M is not an unlocked board. Ryzen Master doesn't work either. The product page advertises, quote, no bloatware, which is true, unless iBUYPOWER installing Radeon software in a system without an AMD GPU and having it launch on boot by default counts as bloatware, in which case it isn't true. With that explanation out of the way, hopefully it'll make more sense when we tell you that out of all of the 6 games we attempted to run, 3 of them wouldn't even launch. From our normal pre-built suite, only Red Dead 2 and Rainbow Six Siege worked, and just barely, with both warning of driver issues. We added Rocket League as a one-off just to throw this thing a bone. In Red Dead Redemption 2, the 167A managed a solid 3 FPS, and that's faster than even the sloth's eye can see. This is being sold as a gaming PC, but it has difficulty even launching games, much less playing them. The Aya Neo outperforms the system. Think about that. The Aya Neo, a handheld made by a company endorsed by a plant-based product company called Whizman, outperforms this. Whizman needs whatever iBUYPOWER has because they're high if they think this is a gaming PC. There's a decent chance that the Atari VCS would outperform this system. iBUYPOWER has actually dethroned the previous worst performer, and it's done so in an impressive way. One of the other games we were able to coax into launching was Rainbow Six Siege, which was at 1080p since 1440 isn't even on the table here. The average here was 9.6 FPS, again undercutting the Redux system, which was 130 FPS. We'd like to apologize to all of the innocent R5 3600s trapped in these machines, never able to achieve really much of anything. And at this point, it feels like we should launch a rescue operation for CPUs out of these computers. We don't have any comparative data really for Rocket League with the pre-built systems, but we ran it anyway since none of the other games tested were even close to playable. By setting everything except render resolution to the absolute minimum, the Element Mini scraped by with a 45 FPS average and an unpleasant 13 FPS 0.1% low. Compared to everything else we ran, this is playable in a literal sense, but it's miserably low on the averages. We run the same benchmark on IGPs, and even gaming on last-gen UHD 630s did better than this, and it had fewer compatibility issues. So that's enough of the testing. We actually did a bunch more like noise and power and everything else that we normally do, but we're going to cut it because it's all irrelevant. This thing is incompetent regardless of how it performs. So that's it then. The biggest thing, obviously, is $690. You're better off buying almost literally anything else, especially computers. You could get a laptop that games better than this and is the same price. You get a desktop that's better than this and is the same price. Why this exists is an anomaly. This 167A is an enigma of some sort. We're not sure what exactly, but we'd like to not find out further. So obviously the answer is don't buy this thing. There have been good pre-builts we've looked at. Skytech had one of them. ABS had one of them. And then there were 1 or 2 others as well that were good in some ways, bad in others. So there are things out there that are okay. This is just not one. iBUYPOWER may have fixed its QC issues with the shipping problems previously. We're not sure. We wouldn't know from this. This really doesn't need the packing foam. It'd probably be wise, but that card doesn't weigh anything. And frankly, if it gets destroyed in shipping, then UPS is doing everyone a favor at that point by removing it from the pool of hardware out there. So MSI should be ashamed, iBUYPOWER should be ashamed, and NVIDIA should be ashamed. They've all done a great part here in creating this concoction of a video card, and the 3600s should be rescued. We should form a new charity group that buys these and rescues 3600s out of them so they can go on to live a better life somewhere else. That's how bad this thing is. So that's it for this one. Don't buy it. Thanks for watching. Go to store.gamersnexus.net if you'd like to help us out directly. Our toolkits are on back order if you want to make sure you get one of those, or patreon.com/gamersnexus for some behind the scenes posts and videos, and we'll see you all next time.